Welcome back to the First Gnostic Church of Christ. We are on video number 9, the reading commentary on the origin of the world. We left off in video number 8 talking about how Adam and Eve were cast down from the perfect Garden of Eden into the garden known as Gone. What many within Orthodox community consider to be the actual Garden of Eden is actually called the Garden of Gone. So it's not the perfect paradise. The paradise that we're referring to in our last video was the place called Earth that we've been cast down to by the demiurge, what we call the prison planet. That's where we left off. And now we're going to pick up in the next section here titled Phoenixes, Water Animals, Bulls of Egypt. And this is probably the most cryptic section of this book. So it's going to require us to understand terms as well as mythology, in particular Egyptian mythology and some Greek mythology. As has been the case, I'd like to review these with you so that when we do go in and read this section, you'll be able to understand more clearly what's being read to you, and you'll be able to appreciate more fully my commentary. Now, the first of these terms is Pe, that's A-P-E-P, or Apophis, was the ancient Egyptian deity who embodied chaos and was thus the opponent light of Ma'at, who is order and truth. Now you could think of these as being Yaldabaoth as opposed to Sabaoth in Gnostic mythology. Ma'at being, of course, Sabaoth, and then Apophis being the equivalent of chaos or Yaldabaoth. He appears in art as a giant serpent. You remember that Yaldabaoth was as a serpent with a lion head. So you can see already Greek mythology as well as Egyptian mythology, along with Gnostic and Christian mythology, all tie in together. And it makes sense given that the Israelites spent a lot of years, perhaps hundreds of years, in Egypt, enslaved. So it would make sense they would pick up a lot of the understanding of who God is from their experience while being in bondage in Egypt. Now, here you can see Atum. Some believe we get the word Adam as well, and the snake Apophis. He's a water snake, and so he represents chaos. This water serpent is actually the creation of the demiurge, who is both made up of Yaldabaoth and Sabaoth. These angels are of the highest order in angelology. These angels set forth to bring about light into chaos. So in this case, the serpent that goes into the tree and introduces the tree of knowledge of good and evil is one example of a Seraphim who comes in the embodiment of a serpent. So you have the three levels. You have Sophia, Christ, who is the spiritual impetus to move the Seraphim race to appear as a serpent or embody into a flesh serpent. Now that's the three levels: the spiritual, the soul-oriented, and flesh-oriented expression that is evident in all things, living beings in the universe. So that's the first of these terms or words that you'll want to appreciate. Atum does is he wrestles with this serpent, and Atum is known to be the god of the universe in this case. And so he continually wrestles with this creature that he has created. This creature, in the self-same time, goes about to mix up the order that is existing in the universe to bring about a higher purpose. So this Seraphim is of the highest order angel, so therefore it is very enlightened, and even Christ himself uses the serpent as a symbol of wisdom, and also, of course, Sophia is known as the Aeon of wisdom. So you can see how all these are interrelated. So keep that in your mind. We see an image of the great pyramids of Giza, and there's nothing like this on the face of the earth. Even today, with our modern technology, all of the scientists, this has been ongoing for almost 200 years, they've been going about trying to figure out how these pyramids were actually built, and still they have no clear explanation, nor do they truly understand some of the symbols and construction within the pyramids. So it's very unique. In addition to, if you look at what runs the planet, money on the dollar bill is, of course, a pyramid, and which is known as the all-seeing eye. Understand that this is the only place on the face of the earth that this particular mystery exists. Nowhere else. All of the other ones that you find, pyramids in Mesoamerica, the pyramids in various different parts of the earth, those can be explained. But this particular one is a mystery, even to today. And it's the only place on earth a masonry has been constructed that cannot be explained by scientists. Now, the next one we want to understand within the mythology or pantheon of gods within the Egyptian mythology is the bull. In Egypt, the bull was worshipped as Apis, the embodiment of Ptah and later of Osiris. So he was actually the combination of these two. The bull was considered an embodiment of both these gods. A long series of ritually perfect bulls were identified by the gods' priests, housed in the temple for their lifetime, then embalmed and encased in a giant sarcophagus. A long sequence of monolithic stone sarcophagi was housed in Seraphim and were later rediscovered. The bull was also worshipped and was the embodiment of Atum-Ra in Heliopolis. Ka in Egyptian is both a religious concept of life force, power, and the word for bull. What it's telling us essentially here is the bull represents life force, and that life force can be had here on the planet Earth by both the sun and the moon, which these two gods of Egypt represent. So you have the sun and the moon, which are the two horns of the bull, and that's why you see in this image the bull carries an orb. That orb representing the sun and the moon combined. This mythology essentially is representing the life force that is in the universe. And that life force is through emanation of light, whether it be reflective light, the feminine, or the masculine light of the sun that is shining its light. The next one we want to read about is the Greek mythology known as the phoenix. And I'm sure most of you know this mythology of the phoenix. It's a long-lived bird that cyclically regenerates or is otherwise born again. Associated with the sun, a phoenix obtains new life by arising from ashes of its predecessor. And it's thought that this bird dies and regenerates every 500 years, and then at the end of 1,000 years, then it dies. And so what we have here is we are signifying the soul-oriented human within Gnostic mythology, which says that originally man was meant to live 1,000 years, the soul-oriented human. But now, of course, we're oriented to the flesh self, and so we just consume ourselves. And we basically die at the point at which all of our energy or our life force is consumed, this flesh human. So that's what you want to understand, so that you're going to be able to appreciate much more fully what cryptically is being said in the next section on the origin of the world. But essentially, the phoenix here represents the soul-oriented human. The bull is representing the luminaries that give off light, which is the life force itself. The two luminaries being the moon and the sun. The next one we already talked about was the Seraphim, which is also known as the serpent. Seraphim, spelled Serpeum, is a temple or other religious institution dedicated to the syncretic Greco-Egyptian deity Serapis, who combine aspects of Osiris and Apis, and we already talked about this, being known as Serapis, which of course is very similar to another word, right? Seraphim. So this water snake, which is essentially the seraphim race of beings known as the highest order of the angels, is the one who comes to the tree of knowledge of good and evil, invites Eve to open her eye by partaking of this tree. And this is, of course, Osiris and Apis. And so Serapis, or Serapis, is a Greco-Egyptian deity. The cult of Serapis was introduced during the 3rd century BC on the orders of Pharaoh Ptolemy I, Soter of the Ptolemaic kingdom, as a means to unify the Greeks and Egyptians in his realm. And so this is essentially what he went about to do, to bring these two gods together into one. And the combination of these two words essentially creates that word Serapis, Apis and Sera, which is Osiris. Another way of saying Osiris, which basically is the sun and the moon being combined, which is the wisdom of the universe hidden. And this also is in Revelation, where it talks about the woman who has moon beneath her feet and the embodiment of the sun and 12 stars above her head, which are the 12 zodiac signs, or the 12 constellations of astrology. Now here I am giving you an example of what a seraphim might look like. Now, of course, this is anthropomorphogenic in its image here, but essentially we always have the seraphim as being an angel that is related to a serpent, and Christ, of course, saying be wise as a serpent, which essentially he's saying be as wise as a seraphim. So he's saying that the seraphim is the one that disobeyed the prime directive of Jehovah, or the demiurge, intervened by telling man, listen, let me tell you what your true origin is. And of course Eve was intrigued and she partook of that knowledge. And so this is what Christ is asking us to do. He's talking cryptic because he knows that, as did the early Gnostic church when they put the books into the jar in Nag Hammadi and buried them, as did Christ speak through parables and cryptically, that the powers that be would, of course, destroy that and would eventually, of course, crucify Christ and anyone that brings this message of our original origins. And the Egyptians know this, the Greeks know this, and the Jewish knew this. And this is, if you historically go back in time, the Sumerians also knew this. And of course, they called it Enki and Enlil, and they talked about serpents and beings from the skies and how they intermingled with mankind. Now, again, don't get lost into the messenger versus the message. These are actual spiritual beings or aliens is really not as important as the actual message that humankind is trapped. And we are trapped here purposely because of the powers that be, what's called the authorities of the rulers, and its head ruler or chief ruler, which is known as Yaldabaoth, the demiurge. And of course, he fortunately has a counterpart to him, his son, Sabaoth, that is watching over him to keep harmony. And this is because of the second aspect of Sophia, wisdom, and Christ, which is Sophia, Zoe Sophia, and Jesus Christ, that came to ensure that this be brought about, to look after humanity. And of course, again, this is all cryptic, so that those that understand, have gnosis, will be able to understand and it not be lost. Now, we're in a window where this information is being made available, but I do encourage you to keep a copy somewhere for your safekeeping, because there's no guarantee that this window will be always open, as the powers that be are already trying to taint Gnosticism, as well as we're moving toward a more fascistic society today. Where this is going, I can't tell you, but it is wise for you to keep this knowledge sacred and share it. As Christ says, don't throw your pearl before swine. But also, Christ says to make fishers of men, meaning, in other words, bring people in. So that is your part of your calling by Christ. He's asking you to bring people to this truth, but do so wisely. Now, we already talked about apophis. That word apo is Greek apo, from, away from, after, in descent from, asunder, off, finishing, completing, back of, time, after, of origin, sprung from, descended from, because of. So in other words, this means that humanity actually is sprung from, that so orient itself, sprung from, potentially sprung from, the Seraphim race. This is a possibility. This is a possible interpretation of what's being said in the Gnostic text. But we're going to take a look at this, and you can decide for yourself when we get to reading that section. Now, I've already talked about the Seraphim, but I thought it was a good idea to talk about the origins and development of this being known as the Seraphim. A connection between Seraphim and the Egyptian motif is well established artistic and contextual clues. Uraeus. We also get the planet Uranus, by the way. The word seraph, or seraphim, appears 3 times in the Torah. In Isaiah 6:2, the term is used to describe a type of celestial being or angel. The other 5 uses of the word refers to serpents. The vision in Isaiah, so you can see this is where I was able to see this. And if you really just tune into Gnosis, you're going to know this. The seraphim means serpent. But then you go into the Bible and you see that's also the case. And you go into Egyptian mythology and Greek mythology, they also have combined man with the serpent to make a god, the penultimate human. The vision in Isaiah chapter 6, the seraphim, in an idealized version of Solomon's temple, represents the sole instance in the Hebrew Bible of this word being used to describe celestial beings. I saw also the Lord setting upon a throne, high and lifted up, and his train filled the temple. Above it stood the seraphims, each one have 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, and with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he did fly. And one cried to another, Holy, holy, holy is Yahweh, the Lord of hosts. And this is referring to Sabaoth. The whole earth is full of his glory, which is Jesus Christ. One seraph carries out an act of ritual purification for the prophet by touching his lips with a live coal from the altar. This text describes seraphim as winged celestial beings with a fiery passion for doing God's good work. They are considered to be a division of the divine messengers. Now, this is the case because they were even above the angels originally. They're essentially correspondences on the spiritual level of aeons. Seraphim appeared in the 2nd century BC book of Enoch, where they are mentioned in conjunction with cherubim as the heavenly creatures standing nearest to the throne of God. So they are at a very high level. They are also called serpents, dragons, an alternate term for hell as well. In the second book of Enoch, two classes of celestial beings are equated with the seraphim and cherubim known as phoenixes. Now you've seen this is coming full circle. The soul-oriented human being is the seraphim mixed with the flesh-oriented human. And this makes for that being able to live 1,000 years, as was the case early on when Adam and Eve was cast out of the garden. You remember that the 7 rulers and the chief ruler attempted to shorten their life, but was only able to take 10 years off of each one, and thus 70 years in total. So they lived around 930 years ultimately. Eventually, mankind depletes into the third stage, which is the flesh-oriented. But he's the phoenix, therefore he's degraded and he rises again. Known as the phoenixes, Chalkidri, ancient Greek, brass and copper, Hydra, water serpent. Both are described as flying elements of the sun that reside in either the 4th or 6th heaven, who have 12 wings and burst into song at sunrise. In the book of Revelation, the beasts are described as being forever in God's presence and praising Him. Now those are the terms you'll want to understand to have a decent orientation as we enter into that next section on the origin of the world. Also, you'll want to understand the secret book of John on the long version, verse number 9. And we're talking about right after the autogen, Christ was emanated from the Mother Father. And then the autogens goes about and has the lights before him, the 12 lights, and the 4 primary aeons. And those 4 aeons represent the 4 different emanations of man's experience. You mustn't think of this as hierarchical system is the mechanization of the demiurge, but rather this is a unfolding of humanity. And so there are 4 layers, and what's talked about in the pleroma, the 4 layers down to the Holy Souls realm, and then finally into this realm known as the Kenoma. And verse 9, and the all was firmly founded through the will of the Holy Spirit through autogens, and from the foreknowledge of the perfect mind through the revelation of the will of the invisible Spirit and the will of the autogens, the invisible Spirit named the perfect human, the first revelation and the truth, Pegara Adamus. So this is the perfect human, the spiritual human, where we started, every one of us in the pleroma in the beginning. We were all full, known to be sons and daughters of God, able to manifest and emanate at will with infinite potential. So this is the spirit that is in every one of us, that perfect being. And it's the part that almost every human being carries in normalcy today. They're asleep. Gnosis is that match that strikes that light and sets it aflame again. And it set him up over the first aeon with the great autogens Christ. Beside the first light, Armozo, and its power dwelled with him. So that's the first level. That is the level of the pleroma, where the Christ resides. Not Jesus Christ, but the Christ. And the invisible one gave him an unconquerable intellectual power, and he spoke and glorified and praised the invisible Spirit, saying, because of you, the all came into being, and it is to you that the all will return. You notice that? That's the key. Everything comes about because of the Mother Father, monad, through the autogens, the Christ, which is the crystallization of the will, Word made flesh, and is formulated in the vessel known as Sophia through wisdom. And I will praise and glorify you in the autogens with the 3 aeons. So that we already talked about the first aeon. Now let's talk about the 3 other aeons. The Father, the Mother, and the Child, the perfect power. And it set up his child Seth over the second aeon. Now this is the man-child. That is of Adam and Eve, the soul-oriented Adam and Eve that brings forth Seth. And notice also the word Seth is very similar to the word Set. Aeon besides the second light, Oriel. And so the second aeon is Oriel. And the children of Seth, meaning those that take on soul bodies, is in this realm. This is the 9th realm. All the other realms above the 9th realm, 10 through 13, is the pleroma. And in the Holy Souls realm, which is known as the area of the veils, that separates the waters from the waters, this is the realm known as the Holy Souls realm. There are 2 areas here, the 8th realm and the 9th realm. The 9th realm is the area where the Holy Souls go to reincarnate as Bhavistas or as avatars of the Spirit, Christinos or Christinas, and they come here to become as a Christ on this earth, to bring this Gnostic truth. We have it through Christ and other incarnations. And so this is these beings, and they do this in order to altruistically give to humanity. But ultimately they run the race and they receive a crown into the pleroma. Now the next realm is the Holy Souls realm, those that take on gnosis and have ascended above the Kenoma, no longer needing to take on a flesh body and B, on the will reincarnation, or the fates, or the configurations, or the astrological will. They have come to know the wholeness of the astrological will and their name and their fullness. And so they go into Holy Souls realm. This is the 8th heaven. And the 3rd Aeon is over that one. And the 3rd Aeon were set up the seeds of Seth over the 3rd light, Devatai. And the Holy Souls were set up. And then finally in the 4th realm, this is the Kanoma. In the 4th Aeon were set up the souls of those who were ignorant of the fullness. And there's 7 heavens. And the earth is in one of those heavens. And in this case, we believe the earth is probably in the 3rd heaven. Aeon were set up the souls of those who were ignorant of the fullness, did not repent. And again, repent means to consider and to relearn of, to think, to know of again. Remember, the word pent comes from the same word we get pensare. Immediately, but they persisted a while. Meaning, in other words, eventually they will find the truth of Gnosis and will return. And afterward they repented. They dwell beside the 4th light, Lilith. These are the creatures who glorify the invisible spirit. I'm meaning all of these creatures that we just talked about. Because every emanation is part of what God intended from the beginning in wisdom. And in other words, through the Sophia. And ultimately to our ascendancy and transcendency, meaning the Christ. Now that you have that information, you may now be able to more fully appreciate the cryptic writings. In this case, the most cryptic section of all, on the origin of the world. So let's now go to that, and I will read and comment. Phoenixes, water animals, bulls of Egypt. Then when Sophia saw that the rulers of darkness cursed her companions, she was angry. Now remember, the companions here are Adam and Eve, the soul-oriented Adam and Eve, who now took of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, offered to her by the serpent, which is another way of saying apophis, which is where we also get the word apotheosis. And that's another way of saying making oneself into be a god. And this is what we're doing when we partake of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. We recognize our godship. And she was angry because they cursed the Seraphim race and they cursed the human race. And when she came out of the 1st heaven with every power, and the 1st heaven here is, you must look at it from Sophia's point of view. Her 1st heaven would be the 8th and 9th heaven. That's from her perspective. She chased the rulers from their heavens, and she cast them down to the sinful world that they might dwell there as evil demons upon the earth. So some of these rulers were cast down in what we call collectively the adversary or Satan. So Satan is not a single entity. Satan is a body of demons and adversarial forces that are working to create enmity and chaos on this planet. But she sent the bird that was in paradise so that, until the consummation of the age, it might spend the 1,000 years in the ruler's world. What is this bird that was in paradise? The bird that's in paradise is an actual creature that exists, that is watching over humanity. In this case, soul-oriented human. But this phoenix is also us. It is that part of us that must remember that we originally actually had wings. And we could soar. This is really the mythology here. And we were in the rightful paradise, known as the Garden of Eden, when we were soul-oriented humans in the Holy Souls realm. This bird would watch over humanity until the consummation of the age, until the end of that age, of the 1,000 years. When humans no longer were to live 1,000 years, then that soul would return back to the paradise. It might spend the 1,000 years in the ruler's world. A vital living being with soul called the phoenix, which kills itself and reanimates itself for a witness to their judgment, because they dwelt unjustly with Adam and his race. So they are the ones that originally witnessed everything that Jehovah God did to them. And they will make an account. All those that went through that period when humans lived for 1,000 years, every one of those holy souls witnessed that firsthand, what was being done to them. And they will have an account of it in the pleroma, in the holy souls. There are 3 human beings and their descendants in the world until the consummation of the age. The spiritual, psychical, and the earthly. This is like the 3 kinds of phoenixes of paradise. And remember, the water snake is known as a phoenix, right? The seraphim, the serpent that Christ talks about, that was in paradise. Even though we are of 3 kinds, we are that phoenix. We are that serpent. We are that bird of paradise. But that's the soul part of us. The first is immortal. That's the spiritual being that was originally in the pleroma. The second attains 1,000 years. In other words, they lived to be 1,000 years. And that was originally what happened when Adam and Eve were cast out of the Garden of Eden, which is not the garden that we talk about in Ortho Christianity, but the actual Garden of Eden that man was in, created by the Elohim, and as a him, male and female. As for the third, it is written in the Holy Book that it is consumed. That's a flesh-oriented man that is known as a consumer today, right? Constantly wanting to consume of this world. Literally wanting to eat itself out of this flesh realm. And it's constantly consuming. It's consumed by a fire. And this is the consummation, the consumer of what's known as the ages, meaning consuming of the ages and the wisdom within those ages. And it's written in the Holy Book is that that is the way it is. How long you will live depends on how quickly you will consume your life force, which is the two bulls offered to you by the moon and the sun, and that light is given to you at birth. Likewise, 3 baptisms exist. The first is spiritual, the second is by fire, and the third is by water. Now, I brought this forth earlier when we talked in the secret book of John of 4 layers. Now, the first layer, in order to go from this flesh realm into the soul realm, you must be baptized by water. And that's the first realm. So in order for you to go into the 8th heaven, you must be baptized by water. This is John the Baptist, right? And Christ even was baptized by water. This symbolizes being dunked into, from the pleroma, into the kenoma, into the murky realms, and then rising back up. That's that third baptism. Now the second baptism is by fire. And that second baptism is going from the 8th realm into the 9th realm. And the baptism by fire is when the soul is tried to see if it's pure. And if it is pure of intent and it is truly full, then it goes into the 9th realm. And then it comes back as a Christina or Dino. And in that case, it then gets baptized spiritually. And then once it's been baptized spiritually, it then returns into the pleroma. And this is the act of the phoenix. It gets regenerated and rises back up from its own ashes. And this is the telling of all cultures when they worship the snake, or they celebrate with the snake, whether it be the Chinese, whether it be the Mexicans, whether it be Egypt. This is something that's through all cultures, American Indians, you name it, because it's within our psychic self. It's within us to know this. And it's part of who we are, because we come from this race of serpents. And yet we are human also. Just as the phoenix appears as a witness for the angels, so too the water serpents in Egypt have become a witness to those who go down for the baptism of a true person. And it's just essentially telling you that the seraphim are there to witness the angels, and the water serpent are those that baptize humans through water, the true humans, the ones that know truth. The water representing purification, the serpent representing wisdom. The 2 bulls in Egypt, insofar as they indicate the sun and the moon as a mystery, exist for a witness to Sabaoth, and this is that god, Apotheos, meaning, in other words, the person who takes on apotheosis, or making themselves into a god. And this is the Jesus Christ. And this bull, the 2 signs, the moon and the sun, representing the Jesus Christ who was sacrificed. But in Egypt, they sacrificed the bull. But here in Jewish, they changed it to a lamb, because bulls were more prevalent in Egypt. Not so many bulls in where the Israelites escaped to. But if you look at the Old Testament, Jehovah God also asked for sacrifice of a virginal bull as well as a virginal lamb. Of course, ultimately we get this word Sabaoth, meaning to escape from, or to get out of. This is the way you get out of this ram. And so this is what it means to worship the Sabbath, which is this last day of the 7 days, right, before the 8th day, when flesh man was made. And so this is the mystery of the sun and the moon, the cycles and the configurations. That Sophia of the world has been exalted above the sun and the moon. So in other words, she's above the constellations. She's above its fate and its configurations. The wisdom is above that, you see. When we embody the Sophia and the Christ, then we rise above. We ascend and we transcend. From the day when she created them and sealed her heaven until the consummation of the age. And the worm that is brought forth from the phoenix is also a human being. So this is the human being, you see. It is written of it, the just will sprout like the phoenix. The phoenix first appears alive and dies and rises again as a sign of what appears at the consummation of the age. So when the ages have been consumed, and we humans will consume everything we can get our hands hold of in this universe to take in the knowledge, then it will be the end of the age. And then we'll be released. And we will no longer, because we'll carry all that knowledge and experience with us, and we'll no longer need to be in the kenoma. This is basically what's being said here. And we'll rise back up. Our original home is the pleroma. We came down here, and out of the ashes we will rise again. These great signs appeared only in Egypt, not in other lands, signifying that it is like the paradise of God. This other mythology that we have in our psychic self, known as the Atlantis, is because in the original paradise, not the Garden of Gon, but the Garden of Eden, where this Elohim created the him, male and female, where we resided originally before we were cast down to this earth, wherever that might have been, I don't know if it was some other dimension or it was Mars or some other place, that place had pyramids, and that place was lush and green, as it called it the luxuriant earth. And man lived to be 1,000 years on average. And we were loved, and everything was good. Then, of course, the powers that be came and cast us down out of envy and jealousy and cast us down to this planet. So this is the story that's in our psychic self. That's known as Atlantis, basically. And the only remnant that we have left of that are the pyramids in Egypt. And this is what it's talking about. These great signs appeared only in Egypt, not in any other lands, signifying that it is like the paradise of God. So that's pretty profound, isn't it, that we can read 3 paragraphs and sum up all of human psychic history, our mythologies, everything that we all instinctively, intuitively feel to be true. We all know that we're here, and yet we can't really answer why. But we have this feeling that we are living under our potential, and we can't make sense of why there's so much bloodshed. We're on the precipice of possibly wiping out humanity with the uprising of fascism. And now, of course, the powers that be, the 2 most powerful presidents or leaders of the world, are now dismantling the original treaty of nuclear disarmament and de-escalation. They're now getting rid of that. And yet people still go out and vote for these politicians. This is the world we live in. And so it's important that we understand what's going on so that we don't continually make these mistakes before humanity wipes itself out. All right, with that, hopefully it wasn't too heavy, and we'll pick up in the next section under Error and Ignorance, Interhuman History in the next video. Bye-bye.